Good morning, beautiful people, and welcome back to the podcast. It has been a hot second. I am recording this for the first time from my new place in Sweden, where I moved to in May, and I haven't yet shared much online on what happened since, but all I can say is soon after we moved, my partner and I went through a really, really powerful portal that pertains to our relationship. And I don't feel like sharing the details yet because I want to share any details and lessons on the other side of it happening. But that is basically the reason why I have been kind of MIA. And it is September here. I am looking here through my window with a lake view, and the leaves are falling off. The autumn is solidly here. It's a beautiful rainy day. And I was refining the curriculum for CO frequency this morning and kind of went on this long, unprompted writing spree on the topics around where this work, subconscious work, really fits in when it comes to us learning to create our own reality. Because this is really what I teach, right? I teach it through the lens of business. I work with business owners, with change makers, but my work ultimately is about learning to change your reality, learning to use energy, frequency, and your alignment to create what you want in life. And those of you who know me and know my movement will know that the reason why I love working with entrepreneurs and change makers is because I care about the collective. I care about the planet. I care about the potential of humanity and us starting to get closer to actually realize at least some of the potential we have as a species. And right now we're not. We are actually walking ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole of extinction, of climate crisis, of exploitation of the feminine, which represents, yes, women, but also the earth. We are cutting off the branch that we're sitting on. And this is because of how we see ourselves, how we see ourselves in relationship to the planet, which is humans at the center of the universe, right? Anthropocentrism. And then the culprit of everything behind oppression of minorities, women, exploitation of the land, colonialism, imperialism, continuous war that we're in, that is all the outcroppings of patriarchy. And so I love working with entrepreneurs, especially in the online coaching space and healing space, because this is where a lot of humans who have a sacred contract to help raise the collective consciousness go, because we don't fit within the conventional system. And there are many, 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 many humans that do, right? So there is absolutely no kind of better or worse here. But it's the reality that if you're doing the kind of work I'm doing now with subconscious reprogramming, theta healing, energy healing, who the fuck's gonna employ me? Do you know what I mean? Like, even if I wanted to have a boss, which I really don't, that doesn't work well for me. But even if I did, it's not that there's like, ads upon ads on LinkedIn of people who are working for a theta healer to employ them and pay them, right? So we go out here and we're creating our own businesses. We're stepping into the shoes of entrepreneurship, whereas a lot of us aren't actually naturally entrepreneurs, right? We are artists. We work with passion. We would do this work for free if we could, right? Which is very different from the mindset of an entrepreneur who goes out there and builds companies to sell them to make money, right? However, because we are different in that sense, we are now also creating our own rules. And we're taking these amazing tools, not just tools, we are creating reality from a deeper place of energy, of frequency, and we are actually leading our businesses from there, which changes the game completely compared to people who are only playing in 3D. But so, I went on this long writing spree on where does subconscious reprogramming work? The work that I'm doing actually fit in to changing our reality. Like, where does it fit in? Because we have this super interesting thing going on in the spiritual community where we actually kind of have two camps of people, if you notice it, right? And we have a camp of people who are the love and light camp, as I call them. And those are people oftentimes who, They're like, you just need to feel better, you need to feel love and joy and higher frequencies. And the shadow of that is oftentimes bypassing emotions left, right, and center, not watching the news because it's high vibe, being completely detached, dissociated from the world around them, and honestly living in la la land, right? And then on the other side, we have the shadow work and healing camp, which are people who kind of reject the narrative of love and light, and they're saying, no, we need to actually look at our shadow. We need to look at our patterns. We need to look at our wounding. We actually need to feel our emotions, and we have to transmute them. But the shadow of that camp is actually rejecting love and light and getting stuck in this perpetual cycle of healing, and then what? Right? More of the same. And so I was kind of thinking about these things, and I kind of wrote down like a framework to understand the completeness of this, to understand where different parts fit in, where my work fits in, but also ultimately what we need to do to learn to master our frequency, master our vibration, which in turn allows us to change our reality. So I have my notes open here, and we're going to dive right in. And this is really going to help you understand what it actually takes and what a process may look like, because the process is non-linear. It's not that like it's either or, it's both and it keeps deepening and it keeps evolving, and different stages of your life, different stages of your business are going to ask you for different ways of approaching this. So let's just kind of, at the beginning, revisit how this whole manifestation thing works, right? Just so we are all on the same page. When we're working energy first, the idea is that everything is connected through what we would call quantum field. Now, we can call it quantum field of all possibilities, or we can call it all there is, or we can call it God, or we can call it source. It doesn't really matter, right? But it's this omnipresent field that connects on the energetic quantum level everything, where there is no separation. Right? And according to quantum field theory, which, yes, it's a theory, but it's the best one we have to explain our reality right now, what we also understand is that it is this quantum field, and that encompasses all of the different subfields that exist within that, from which matter comes. So it's not that energy and matter are separate, that this quantum field and the material reality are separate. It is actually matter that comes out of this quantum field, meaning it is the frequency of this quantum field that ultimately creates what we observe and what we know as physical reality. And remember here, right, because we were also deeply indoctrinated with this materialistic view that what we can see and perceive through our senses is real, we gotta really remember that there is so much more out there that we don't see, because what we perceive with our senses is ultimately limited by the senses. We have specific receptors in our retina, in our eyes, that are attuned to consciously perceiving only a tiny percentage of light, right? So if you've ever seen the light spectrum, you know that the visible light is a tiny percentage of the whole spectrum. Similarly to light, the sounds that we can actually consciously perceive is vastly smaller than the whole possible spectrum of frequency, of sound wave that is out there. And so that's just the first thing that we need to remember. And then on top of that, our brain actually takes all of this and creates an interpretation, right? What you perceive as an image at the end of it is constructed by your brain, which is heavily influenced by what you learned as well from your parents and people in your life as you were growing up. So nothing that you perceive is absolute. It is a byproduct of your senses, which really means receptors, molecules in your body that create a certain response, a certain molecular cascade in your body in response to receiving a stimulus, that being a sound wave, a light wave, some form of frequency, some form of energy. And it is different frequency, right, that then creates a different signal that then at the end of that cascade creates what we would describe as color, shape, type of a sound, smell, right? But that all is human interpretation. None of that is the ultimate truth. And so we want to remember that when we're working with it, that truly we just exist in this soup of frequency, soup of energy, and our bodies, our brains are designed to work and operate within a specific subset of vibration. And they're attuned to the specific subset of vibration that forms what we call the visible 3D material world. But all of this is still just energy, is all just frequency, is all just information that gets interpreted by us in a specific way. So when we're working then energy first, if we understand that ultimately everything is energy and that energy creates matter, we understand that if we can change the underlying frequency, the material outcome has to look different. That shifting this frequency is going to change the material outcome. So if we learn to change our vibration, our frequency, our personal reality will look different, which is what we're trying to do here. So instead of working matter to matter, which is what most people do, which is work harder, take more action, all of those things, we are saying, but what if I first focus on vibration? Because if vibration creates matter, then it kind of makes more sense to work on frequency first, right? And I'm not saying action is not important. I'm not saying we don't take action. Like, obviously we're embodied physical beings here. Like, we work with 3D. We're meant to work with 3D. And we're also energetic beings first. And so if we can master the frequency aspect of things, we can quantum leap, we can collapse timelines, we can create totally illogical results, like how I hit my first 5-figure month with 250 followers on Instagram. And everybody was like, that's impossible. And I'm like, no, it's fucking not. Like, why? You know, we just made that up. And so this is what we are effectively, what I teach. This is what I help you do. I help you master your frequency so that you come into your own alignment, so that you can live a fucking extraordinary life, whatever that looks like for you. And if you have a business, that means that you have a really wildly successful business that supports you, that supports your lifestyle, and that helps heal the planet and raise collective consciousness, which is ultimately what I really care about. Like, I don't really care, little tangent, I don't give a shit about how much money you make. I care about you being in alignment. I care about you being happy. I care about you experiencing joy and freedom and expansion that your soul came here for. And in the process of that, I care about you using your gifts to help us change our collective reality. And money is the byproduct of you being in alignment and sharing your gifts. So that's kind of the premise, right? So then the idea is, right, if frequency creates matter and our personal little quantum field, so the frequency, the lump sum of all of the vibrations that are in your field, which there are many, and we're going to talk about that later, if that creates your personal reality, and by the way, it's the lump sum of the frequency on this planet that creates our collective reality. So when we start working on our own personal quantum field, on our own personal vibration, that creates a ripple effect across the board. And we are going to see a massive collective shift as we reach a certain threshold of enough people coming more and more into alignment and releasing a lot of the density, which we're going to talk about later. And then we're going to see a different 3D reality, right? Things that we observe in our 3D reality that are really horrendous: genocide, war, massive amounts of violence, homicide, murder of beings all around the planet, ecocide, that is a material culmination of the vibrations and thought forms that we collectively, that dominate in our collective awareness, which is really kind of quite concerning. And on the flip side, as we start deconditioning and releasing and transmuting that, our collective reality has to shift, because that's just how the universe works. So now, how do we then work with our personal frequency, right? Because we never want to get too caught up in the collective, because ultimately the only thing we can control is our own frequency. That is the only thing you have control over in your life, because this is a free will universe. So the most you can do, the best thing you can do, is come into your own alignment, take care of your own vibration, and take aligned action from that space, whatever that may look like. And that is different for everyone. So how do we recognize and how do we start shifting? Like, what is actually this frequency? How do we know where it's at? How do we know what we're vibrating at? What tells you what you vibrate at is how you feel. It is your feeling, it is your emotional state that represents your frequency, So you may have seen the emotional scales that exist. If you haven't seen that before, type into Google Abraham Hicks emotional scale or just emotional scale. I like the one from Abraham Hicks, but it basically shows you, right, where there are higher frequency emotions. So higher frequency emotions would be joy, appreciation, empowerment, freedom, love, passion, enthusiasm, happiness. Then if we're going a little bit lower but still high, we're looking at positive expectation and belief. We're looking at optimism. We're looking at hopefulness. And we're looking at satisfaction and contentment. And then we're starting to go lower down, right? And in the kind of mid bracket, which is like not super high vibration, not super low, we're looking at boredom, pessimism, frustration, impatience, overwhelm, disappointment, doubt, worry, blame, discouragement. And then as we're going lower and lower down, we're looking at things like anger, revenge, hatred, rage, jealousy, insecurity, guilt, unworthiness. And then at the bottom, really at the bottom, which vibrates just above death, is things like fear, grief, depression, despair, and powerlessness. Also things like apathy and defeat are emotions I see a lot in my clients, etc. Now, just a little reminder, right? It's not about good or bad, these emotions. It's not about we shouldn't be feeling them, and we're going to talk more about that. It's just if we actually just assessed what is the frequency of that emotion, one would be higher and one would be lower, right? Remember, everything in universe is just information. Like good and bad, right and wrong are human constructs that change throughout millennia, centuries, decades sometimes, right? Things that were considered good and right in your parents' generation are maybe considered as completely inappropriate for our generation already. And that's just the evolution of human consciousness and our perception that is stuck in this duality that we project onto the world around us, but it's not actually the highest truth, right? But so the idea is that if we actually want to experience, then what we actually all desire to experience in our lives is actually more of these positive emotions, right? And that's the truth. And the reason why and why alignment and manifestation is found within those emotional states is because they are the emotional states that are actually authentic to our soul. So our souls, which are directly plugged into source energy, naturally vibrate at those frequency states, which is why they feel so good in our body, right? They're actually what we are meant to feel most of the time. Your entire body is a system that is calibrated to seeking things that feel good. And we've created, of course, throughout our history as humanity, a lot of programming that changed this, right? Where we created religious beliefs such as suffering is virtuous and pain is virtuous and life is hard and all of these things. And happiness is not the point of life, which I heard so many times growing up. Those are programs. Those are programs. They aren't the highest truth, but because we got conditioned with them, then we believe it's true, and then we get really fucking confused. And then we deprive ourselves of things that feel good, and we punish ourselves for feeling good, and we demonize pleasure, and we demonize desire, and all of those things, right? And we just go around doing shit that doesn't feel good. And that's the reality, is we are doing that because we were conditioned to do that. And of course, here, like a side note, obviously there's the caveat that you don't want to be going around like the world just doing shit that feels good in the moment, right? Restraint is a virtue, balance is a virtue, like all of those things are a virtue. And we've engineered today things like foods that are really there to hijack our feel-good pleasure systems like dopaminergic systems, serotonergic systems, etc. Drugs will do the same thing. Any form of addiction will do the same thing, right? There, you're obviously out of balance, and then it's gonna take willpower to get out of that. But when you are actually in a state of balance, your body craves things that are good for you. And anyone who's ever done things like a sugar detox or something like that, or let's say you use a lot of salt in your food and then you go on a detox and you come out on the other side of it and you're like, I don't crave this anymore. And all of a sudden your body's craving whole foods. All of a sudden, I know for me, for example, I gave this example in CEO Frequency this morning because we talked about alignment and we talked about God, what else did we talk about? Oh yeah, like tuning into the frequency of miracles, etc. I was saying how as a kid, because my body used to be so out of balance, my dopamine was so depleted, I was malnourished and all of that, I was really craving chocolate and sweets. Like you would put a bar of chocolate in front of me and I couldn't stop. And that was like the shitty kind of milk chocolate, you know? And I would just keep devouring that because I was so out of balance and I didn't know what balance felt like. And then as I shifted my lifestyle, my habits, I detoxified my body, I went through the healing journey, I started working on my hormones, like the whole shebang. Right now, any chocolate you put in front of me, if it's below 80%, I'm gonna find it too sweet. And you can put a bowl of crisps in front of me and I can sit there without touching it because my body has recalibrated so much closer to balance that it's naturally craving more and more of things that are good for me. And in an ideal world, which is obviously not how humans live, but in an ideal world, right, when we were raised without a lot of trauma, or better said, we would be taught how to process emotion and trauma in a healthy manner, where we would be allowed to be our authentic selves, where we hadn't been forced to eat things we didn't want to eat, where we weren't fed stuff that hijacked our systems and destroyed our guts, and we weren't given, a bunch of stuff that like destroys our gut microbiome and introduces heavy metals into our bodies, etc., etc. We would automatically choose things that are right for us. Like we would gravitate towards them. We would have a very clear connection to our bodies, yes, no, and we would just pick them, right? That is the ideal case scenario. Obviously, that's not how most of us live. That's not how most of us experience reality. And so then we're in this confused state when we're like, oh my God, does this feel good because it's actually good for me, or because, my imbalanced like body wants it, or my trauma and like my subconscious undercurrent is making me gravitate towards that. And surely, like, there is no way to wake up one day and be completely in alignment. This is a process of self-discovery. This is a process of evolution. This is a process of deconditioning. This is a process of clearing the subconscious crap and starting getting closer and closer to our authentic frequency. But once we are there, then we are in a frequency of creation, and it's gonna feel good. It's gonna feel like ease. It's gonna feel like flow. It's gonna feel like passion. It's gonna feel like desire. It's gonna feel like excitement. It's gonna be like, ooh, like I love this. This feels juicy. And that is our soul's authentic vibration. And ultimately, this is what we are all trying to get closer to. And in that experience, we experience love, we experience appreciation, we experience gratitude. And then what happens is that as we are more and more in that frequency, through the laws of the universe, one of them, the most famous one, probably being the law of attraction, we attract more of the magic frequency into our life that then collapses into matching reality. So the more we vibrate at these higher frequencies, the more I don't like the word attract. I don't think it works to like attraction because it sounds like an active magnetic process. To me, it's more like recalibration. It's more like we just align ourselves with a timeline that exists at the same vibrational frequency. But I think that's more semantics than anything else. Point being, then that vibration gets amplified. It collapses into 3D, and this is what creates our physical reality. And then all of a sudden, our physical reality matches our vibration, and because our vibration is high, then all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, now I manifested this perfect house, like that is amazing, and this perfect partner that feels like my soulmate, and my body's getting healthier and healthier, and my bank account is full, and all of these amazing things begin to happen because they exist at the same vibration that you're vibrating at anyways, right? So this is really what we're going for. We're going for embodying more love. We're going for embodying more joy. We are going for embodying more of these frequencies. So now let's go back to this schism. Let's go back to this division in the camps between like the love and light camp and the transmuting shadow camp, because they seem to be kind of the polar opposites in here. And I think a lot of the time it can get a bit confusing. Is like, well, I am like feeling all these positive feelings and I'm thinking positively, I'm repeating affirmations, I'm not seeing results. But then on the other hand, it can also be like, I'm working with my shadow, I'm transmuting all these things, like I'm constantly looking at my patterns, I'm super self-aware, but I'm also not seeing results. Like my life still doesn't look or feel the way I want it to feel. And I want to dive here first into a little bit of like the archetypes of people who fall into these camps, because I first want you to understand that if you identify with one of these, but you don't hold the other, so if you're very much the love and light person who's only in the positive, and you're not actually looking at the shadow, you're not actually having any sort of shadow work practice, and vice versa, if you're only in shadow work and you're rejecting love and light, you're actually playing into archetypes, and you are doing that from your own subconscious imbalance. So this is actually in and of itself a form of self-sabotage that is preventing you from actually seeing the results. Okay, so let's dive into it. So first, the love and light camp are people who have subconscious patterns of avoidance and escapism. So oftentimes these will be people who, because of growing up in some sort of a traumatic environment, that being emotionally unstable and volatile, or it could be a lot more extreme than that, right? Remember that trauma is highly subjective. It is not about what happened, and it is about how what happened was perceived by the person, what it represented to them, how it made them feel, and depending on your level of emotional sensitivity, right? For some people who are extremely sensitive, quite a small thing that wouldn't affect someone else can have a profound effect. And sometimes for someone who's more maybe resilient and less sensitive, they'll won't even respond to it, and it won't create anything long-term or permanent in terms of scarring in their field, right? But let's say that there was a level of trauma, a level of ungroundedness, a level of instability. These people cope with it by going into avoidance and escapism. So more of this flight, freeze, shut down, but especially flight response, where there's a lot of the time dissociation. They would escape reality. They can escape into fantasy worlds. They can learn to live, basically leave their body and escape into their own safe bubble that doesn't exist in this reality. These people oftentimes avoid responsibility. They can be really ungrounded. They can be really flaky and unreliable as friends or partners, right? It could be more of this avoidant attachment. They may struggle to see things through. These are oftentimes people who are I'm not going to watch the news because it's low vibe and my nervous system didn't evolve for that, which is basically saying I'm avoiding the truth. I'm avoiding the reality that I chose to incarnate in this reality as a soul, which means I can handle what is in this reality, and I need to develop the resilience and the capacity to actually work with it. There are oftentimes also people who will, in the name of going with the flow and just waiting and seeing what the universe has in store for them, they won't actually take responsibility for their life. And this is a trauma response. And they will escape into love and light, into these projections, in this fantasy world where they're actually looking. Oftentimes there can be a religious subconscious projection as well, where this indoctrination of heaven comes through and is we're just going to create if I only do everything right and I think positively and all that, then I'm going to be in this magical heavenly place when there is no pain, no suffering, nothing like this, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just that now they took death out of the picture and they can create it here. There's a lot of that in spirituality, where there is this old religious projection of heaven and hell, that if you're just virtuous enough and do all the things right, then you're going to be rewarded with whatever, which is not really how this life works. Because your soul has things in store for you that are just, they're a part of your timeline, they're a part of your path. So anyway, that's a separate conversation. Now, the shadow work camp, people who are adamant about shadow work, and they are constantly digging deeper and doing more and solving things, they're people who are fixers. So in response to having a level of trauma and ungroundedness and instability in their childhood, they're right, if I just work hard enough, if I'm overachiever, if I solve problems, I just have to work harder, then I'm going to have some level of safety and security. Then I'm going to be rewarded. Then I'm going to get something then I'm going to have my needs met to a certain extent. That's me, by the way. I never did the love and light thing. I went straight deep dive into shadow work. I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart. I have moon in Pisces, a lot of water, right? But I also was a fixer. I'm a 5-1 in human design. I had to carry an immense amount of responsibility as a kid, and I had to perform, achieve in order to have some level of recognition, some level of safety, some level of stability, right? Now, these people who do this as well, and this is the interesting thing is they oftentimes carry beliefs on the genetic line that life is hard, life is suffering, hard work is virtuous, and there can be a shadow of egotism So their ancestors may have been really hardworking people, and they created a story that they are better than those lazy people, that because they work so hard and because they're going through all the pain and difficult things, look at me, I am better than those lazy people who are completely irresponsible. And they project that onto the love and light people. And the interesting thing is that this camp, because they receive validation and sense of worth through this superiority, they reject the ease and flow. And then they stay in this process of constant transmutation. But because they believe that their worth is linked to this hard work in the spiritual path, then they never actually attune to ease and flow and fun and joy, because that would make them lazy and irresponsible. And so they reject the love and light people. And these two camps, do you see how they're like a perfect match for conflict? And then we're cycling in this like thing of like, who's doing it right? And we're like butting heads. And it's like, all these people, they're just bypassing all the time, da 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 da. In fact, y'all are just having different combinations of subconscious beliefs and different nervous system mechanisms coping with trauma. And as kind of generally the greatest wisdom is looking for the middle path. Where is the middle path? Where is balance? Hi, I do have 5 planets in Libra, but it is the truth. That is the truth. We're always looking for the middle path. And as with everything, it exists here as well. So let's now look at why we're having these issues and how to navigate them as human beings, which by definition means we are actually a walking contradiction. So love and light is the ultimate reality, okay? It is the ultimate truth. It is the thing, the reality that is permanent, that is omnipresent. It is the frequency of God, source, creator, all there is, Sophia, whatever you want to call this source of life, source of light, source of everything that is. It's the frequency of unconditional love. So that is the highest truth. So as we vibrate at a frequency of unconditional love, we can bend universal laws, we can manifest instantly. We're basically in these creator frequencies. And these kind of 3 highest frequencies are love, truth, and joy. And one will always lead you to another. So if you're in your joy, you're going to be in your alignment. You're going to be coming closer to the truth of who you are. You're going to be finding love. If you're in your love, you're going to be experiencing more joy in your life. And if you're seeking the truth, you're also going to eventually come to joy, because your highest truth, which is your soul, which is creator, is joy and truth and love. So they always kind of lead you to the same place. Now, the crux here, though, is that while love and light is the ultimate reality, it is not the human reality. Human reality is very different. Human reality is not permanent. Its signature is actually impermanence, imminence. Human reality contains pain. It almost inevitably contains suffering. It contains death, loss, duality. All of these things that aren't true at the highest level. It includes having immortal soul and a mortal body. And because of that, we live in this continuous push-pull friction of immortal soul that is constantly evolving, constantly expanding, constantly seeking more, constantly seeking to be more expressed, and the mortal body ruled by the subconscious mind, which is always trying to keep you alive, which means wanting things to stay the same, wanting as little change as possible. Because ultimately what it wants is safety, stability, things staying the same. And so this is the reality of what it means to be a human. You're a walking contradiction. And this is why, by definition, painless human experience is near impossible. And it is truly about choosing your hard. It's the hard of expansion, transmutation, walking and stepping into the unknown, which automatically comes with uncertainty, which is just about the worst thing you can do to your subconscious, right? Which is why we're constantly working. We are given the opportunities on our path to expand our nervous system capacity. And normally we expand nervous system capacity through challenge, through things that are hard. Now, on the other side is the hard of staying in your comfort zone, living your life far below your potential, settling for less than you truly desire in your business, in your relationships, in your bank account, telling yourself that it's enough, it's okay, whereas you feel deep down inside this tug, this feeling of, but is there more? Is this all there is? Is this it? And most people choose that. Most people live in that reality, constantly convincing themselves they're happy and they're grateful for what they have, when their body speaks differently, when their frequency speaks differently, where their 3D reality speaks differently. Because your frequency and your 3D reality, they don't lie. They don't lie. Words can lie. Frequency cannot lie. And 3D reality doesn't lie. Which is why you can have people who are like, I'm such a positive person. I'm repeating all these affirmations all day, every day. I love everybody. Their 3D reality is in shambles. Their bank account is empty. Their relationships are a shit show. They keep attracting the same people over and over again that disrespect them, that don't honor them, that are flaky, that are unreliable, whatever it is. And they keep repeating affirmations. It's not going to work. But 3D doesn't lie. So the reality is that you embodied as a human for a reason, right? And a lot of the time when it comes especially to this love and light camp, actually both camps, because they're based on avoidance and fixed mode and normally quite a bit of resentment that is in the subconscious mind, there's a lot of the time this rejection of being a human, right? We kind of want to escape from being a human. A lot of transcendental, like Father God religions, that being Eastern or Western, really are asking us to transcend being human, right? Flesh is sinful, or it's not that important, and like the earthly desires or whatever are actually taking you further away from God and transcendental stuff. That's all bullshit, by the way. That's patriarchy that is like actually like grooming you to be completely fucking dissociated from your body or desires, and that really disempowers people, especially women, right? But on the spiritual path, what we're actually looking to do is first to remember and then reconcile these different parts of ourselves. And the way I think about alignment, right? Because alignment is such an overused word, but maybe a better word is congruence. That you're looking to create congruence between different parts of you, namely your conscious, your subconscious, and your what we could call supraconscious. So supraconscious being the soul, so the part of you that's directly plugged into source, into creator, into quantum field, that can receive all of this information, downloads, creative energy. Then there's your subconscious, and subconscious is so fascinating, right? We have a whole episode here that is a deep dive. It's episode 2, but subconscious encompasses imprints of all of your lived experiences, as well as your past life experiences, and it also carries the experiences of your ancestors. So it's this field of all of these different imprints, thought forms, each of which carries a frequency that is contributing to your not really collective, but to your own whole complete mini quantum field, personal quantum field, which again then creates your reality. And then there's the conscious part of you, right? The part that you're aware of, the part where you can think, you can reason, you can future project, and all of the memories that you can recall at will. And again, remember, if we're looking percentage-wise, right, that your subconscious, we're looking at around 90%, so of your awareness, right? Only about 10%, plus minus 5, kind of, depending on who you ask, is within your conscious awareness. And as we do this work, of course, this keeps expanding, which is, by the way, what is directly correlated to your free will, right? People want to have these conversations. Is free will real? Like, does it exist or no? Again, it's not black and white. Your free will, your capacity to make these decisions increases directly with the amount of subconscious that you bring into your conscious, with the amount of self-awareness that you cultivate, because you can recognize things not just at face value. You can see what's happening below the surface, and you can adjust and make decisions accordingly that actually are not just replaying experiences from the past or experiences of your ancestors, but are honoring what you actually desire in this life. So how then based on what we talked about, how do we then reconcile the feeling good camp, love and light camp with the shadow work camp? And especially, how do we then combine both? How do we walk this middle path so that we can learn to actually create our own reality in the most effective way? And the truth is that we need more. We need both. We need both, because the ultimate goal is to become more love. The ultimate goal is to experience more joy and more contentment. And if you're trying to tell yourself this isn't the truth, then you have some nasty subconscious programming in your subconscious mind that's telling you that you deserve to suffer and that you should suffer. Maybe you need to martyr yourself to fulfill your purpose. Maybe you need to martyr yourself to be close to God. But underneath those programmings and those conditionings is actually a deep desire to experience the true vibration of your soul. And that carries joy, it carries love, it carries satisfaction, it carries inner peace, it carries contentment. Because in reality, there's a little tangent here, right? Like, a lot of people are about vibrating higher. And while yes, you're going to vibrate higher on the emotional scale, you're not actually looking through this work to vibrate higher. You're looking to vibrate at your soul's authentic frequency, right? Which is what I call the 1% frequency. It's your truth. It's your authentic vibration. And in order to do that, we are actually changing our subconscious to increase the frequency of our subconscious by actually releasing stuff that's out there so that we bring it like closer to your soul. So basically, we're looking to get your conscious and subconscious and soul frequency kind of on the same level. And that's a lifelong process, but that's really what it is. That's what we're doing. But in order to do this, right, in order to start getting our subconscious and our conscious closer to that, we need the shadow work. So we need to change, we need to transform our subconscious mind. Because remember how I told you, right, that we carry all of these imprints in our subconscious mind that form the completion of your personal quantum field. You can think positive all day long. You can like try to feel good without doing it, but that frequency is still present there. So these are all the frequencies that are the opposite of love in some form. And it's not just fear. Like, we can, semantics and play like what is the direct opposition of love is fear. And truly all of these things in some way are the outcropping and the evolution of fear into different emotional experiences. But when we're looking at the untruth is what you are not in your soul's frequency. That's anything that isn't love. And emotions that encompass that I work a lot with helping people release from their subconscious is resentment, rejection, regret, doubt, fear, revenge, imprints of prosecution, suffering, limitation, restriction, defeat, depression, apathy, settling. All of these are frequencies that are not your authentic self. They're not congruent with your soul, right? And this is where we need the shadow work to transmute them. And as we then release all of these emotions, all of these beliefs, because they're all together, right? It's like an emotion is kind of attached to a belief, and they're together forming this like thought form frequency pattern in your field. And as we start to transmute them, to release them, you're automatically starting to vibrate higher, not because something is like changing fundamentally in your consciousness, but because your truth, your soul is beginning to shine through that. And then within that vibration of your soul, all of your desires are already present. Your divine timing is already there. And then what you want consciously begins to align with what your soul desires. Your subconscious is on board with creating that. All three of them are in alignment. And it's like the way I think about it is like a pipe. And it's like a pipe that flows like this life force energy, creator energy, can flow all the way from it through, from your supraconscious, subconscious, down to your conscious, and then into action, which creates the physical manifestation. And when our subconscious mind is filled with these imprints of rejection, resentment, regret, doubt, disbelief, whatever else it is, it's like this pipe has 3 parts. Then the first part, which is plugged into the source, your soul, is on point, but then their subconscious one is moved. So instead of them being one underneath the other and this energy being able to flow through, is like the second part of the pipe was installed wrong, and now the overlap between them is so tiny that only like it's like a trickle of this energy can actually come through. And then of course you're not living anywhere near your potential, and you're not feeling the way you could be feeling, and not creating what you could be creating. But when we start creating the subconscious alignment, your natural soul vibration can really shine, and this frequency, like this creator source energy, can flow through you in a really clear, unobstructed way. And this is basically how these two camps come together. And this is why you really don't want to form an identity or attachment, being one or the other, being this like purely shadow work person or this purely like affirmation person, because you need both. And there are going to be times of your life when you're vibrating really high and you're really in these frequencies of love and joy and all of that, and things are popping in your 3D and things are amazing. And then you're going to be pulled into the underworld. Then there's going to be a demand, really, for you to grow into your next level of evolution, which is going to require you to look at the things within your field that are out of alignment with it. This is why oftentimes when you call in, people think you're going to call in your desires, and you know, all of a sudden they're just going to pop in your 3D. People in business are like, oh, I want, 10K months. And then they're going to be like, and then you get the whole messaging of like, just lean back and receive. And then you go into lean back and receive, or people like triple down on strategy and like hustle, hustle, hustle. Whereas in reality, what's going to happen is that the universe is like, cool, you want 10K months, so who do you need to become? And it's going to bring you clients, it's going to bring you people, it's going to bring you experiences that are going to trigger all of your stuff in order for you to clear it, in order to move to the next level. And then you're going to be at that level, you're going to ask for something new, you're going to cast a new desire, and the universe is like, awesome, let's get you that. But first, we got to look at all these things that are right now standing in the way. And so you're going to be ebbing and flowing through this constant spiral process of evolution, when you're going to be having to clear out the parts that aren't you. And this is where my work comes in as well. And I really work between them. I'm working more and more as well with, because that's something I do naturally, and I'm starting to teach it more and more, also how to tune into the positive frequencies, because we want to have this part. But basically we're balancing the two. And I'm going to speak to one last part before we kind of close this off, to really understand what we're doing here. And another way you can think about it is that we're looking, if we want to see permanent and consistent shift in our 3D realities, we are looking to change our emotional baseline, our frequency baseline. And this is where both of these approaches, both tuning into the positive frequencies and conditioning your body to the positive emotion, but also clearing out the quote unquote heavy, dense emotions, they need to work together. Because if you want permanent shift in your 3D reality, you need permanent shift in your frequency. And that means your emotional baseline, your frequency baseline, which is what creates your reality, needs to change. Because what's happening otherwise, right, is that we are having our little personal quantum field, and we're having all the subconscious imprints there, which includes all of the also resentments and rejections and unworthiness and these things from our ancestors, not just us, from our childhood. And then without transmuting that, we're now tuning into like positive frequencies. And people are like, I'm thinking so positively, da 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 da. Have you noticed how people who just like bypass and think positively and do affirmations, they don't get anywhere? Like their reality doesn't really permanently shift. I have some friends who've been doing this kind of work for years, and their lives look precisely the same, right? Because their baseline frequency hasn't actually shifted. And then you try to feel good, you try to tune into that, and you may be able to do it for a day, 2 days, maybe a week, but then something is going to happen. Maybe a person is going to trigger you. You have a conversation with someone and you fly off the handle. Like you get all this rage coming on or whatever it is, and it's going to pull you back. Because your baseline frequency hasn't changed, because that emotion is present there. This is what happens if you don't actually work on the transmutation. And in fact, what you're going to do is that you're going to create situations, you're going to attract people that are going to trigger that in order for you to heal it. So I see that a lot of the time. I've seen that with my partner, I've seen that with my family, I've seen that with my clients. Most of us have immense amounts of anger stored in our field. And a lot of the time we're not even aware of it, especially if we were conditioned to be good girls, especially if we were in families where it wasn't acceptable to show anger. We are pushing it really far deep down, right? And we're like, no, I'm not an angry person. And there are going to be other emotions that are actually it can actually end up being a depression or apathy, because there is so much energy being drained pushing this emotion down that you end up just being fucking exhausted all the time, and you start going into nervous system freeze and shut down. That's actually quite common. A lot of people who are struggling with depressive tendencies actually have just so much unprocessed anger. It's going to come out elsewhere, right? A lot of the time it's going to be autoimmune disease. Like I've seen this, some form of like a physical illness or like a mental issue. But what I've seen with a lot of these people who are on the surface, like super nice, super calm, super like friendly people that you never see them angry, they will attract, every time they drive, they will attract like quote unquote stupid drivers. They will attract people that do just stupid shit on the road. I remember having this conversation with my partner, who is one of those people that was taught to never show anger, and he pushed it really deep down inside, and he really didn't think of himself as an angry person. And every time he was driving and he would come back, he'd be like, I had these 3 people do this stupid thing, and this cycling, and this like the cyclist doing the stupid thing, and this like other lady, and then he would go and he would bike. And they'd be like, and I attracted this stupid driver and this thing and this thing. I've seen the same thing with my family as well. And eventually I had to sit him down and be like, why are you co-creating this? There would also be attracting bureaucrats that are dragging their feet where you have to wait every time. It's because you're going to be attracting people and situations to trigger and to get you angry, because this emotion really, really wants to go out. And so then you're constantly attracting in your 3D situations that are trying to get this anger to be expressed in order for you to actually shift your emotional baseline. But this is ultimately what you need to be working on. We are looking to be releasing layers of untruth of who we are not from our field: resentment, rejection, regret, unworthiness, self-doubt, like confusion, apathy, depression, anything like this. We are looking to release that, because those are conditioned patterns, those are thought forms that we or our ancestors chose or were taught to take on at some point, but they are not congruent with who we actually are internally. And this is why we do shadow work. This is why we do subconscious work. This is why we do energy healing. And as we are releasing these things out of our field, our frequency baseline is increasing. And the way you're going to recognize this is you don't get triggered by the same things anymore. So you're not cycling in the same thing over and over again. This is the best indicator, but you're also just going to feel better overall. And ultimately where we're going with this is the last thing, is that we are learning to shift faster. This is really the thing that happens with this process. As we're processing deeper and deeper and deeper levels and layers of trauma, of anxiety, of fear, of anger, of resentment, of rejection, of regret, is that we're going to spend more time in these higher frequencies naturally, not because we need to think positively. We're naturally going to have better thoughts, because thoughts are associated with frequency that we're on. Each thought has a frequency, each frequency has a thought form associated with it. We're naturally going to be spending more time there. But also when we move into a different vibration, we can shift faster. So we are just increasing the time we spend in the positive, higher vibrational states naturally. It's an organic process. We don't need to force it. And then that's going to create a corresponding shift in our 3D reality. But we cannot get there without doing the work that is actually releasing the dense and heavy imprint, because we can be tuning into positive all day long, but it's still present in our field. And it will need to get released sooner or later. And the most powerful way you can do this work, and the fastest way to do it, is to combine both. Where on the one side, we are clearing the dense and heavy emotions. This is basically what my work with CEO Frequency is all about, where we are working through the lens of business on every single area of your business: sales, visibility, know, like, trust, authenticity, personal power, desire, all of these different parts. And we are clearing the untruth, we're clearing the beliefs, we're clearing the frequencies and thought forms from your field that are, yes, stopping you in your business, but what they're ultimately doing is keeping your vibration low, so that you can start tapping into these higher frequency expressions of you that are already inside of you. They're just being kind of muddied up with all of these layers and layers and layers and layers of programming, layers and layers of conditioning. And then all of a sudden, you're coming closer and closer to your truth, and inspiration's hitting, clients are signing up, your bank account is popping, all of that. Also, your relationships are improving. Also, you're getting all of these different opportunities. Also, you just bought a new apartment. I had 2 clients recently. One of them moved into their dream apartment that they absolutely did not believe it was possible to find it. Like, in the city, the housing market is crazy. The prices are crazy. Found the perfect apartment, everything to a T. She was like, there's no way in hell I would have been able to create it without our work together. I have another person in CEO Frequency just bought a new place. People are reconnecting with, like, their siblings. People are having just all of these incredible opportunities because your frequency has now shifted, and everything gets better. Because it's hard to selectively change your vibration. It's hard. And you can have the thing when one area of your life is really open and really flowing, but if another one is constricted, it's going to leak into everything else, because you're a complete being. Like, in nature, everything is connected. Everything's connected within your body. Everything is connected within your energy field. If you look at meridians, there's not multiple meridians. There's one continuous meridian. If you look at the fascial tissue, it's one web in the body. If you look at our ecosystems, everything changes when one thing changes, and the same is in your life. And this is basically the process. This is the process of spiritual growth, is digging deeper on one end and expanding higher on the other end, and expanding the capacity and the understanding of who you are, and going through this continuous spiral of evolution, becoming curious over and over again who you are as a human being, what you're here to do, what your soul has come here to do, what is possible for you. And if you want to do this in a balanced way, you need to find a middle path between doing the shadow work, the deconditioning, the reprogramming, and also bringing more joy, bringing more fun into your life, cultivating that. And then you're naturally becoming more and more aligned with your soul's unique vibration, and then life becomes magic. And that's ultimately what me and everybody else who's doing this work truly want from life. All right, my beauties, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully I'll be back soon, sooner than last time. And I'm excited to hang out together here again very soon. Much love.